Alexander Valley, which is, as many of our listeners know, one of my favorite areas in wine country because it's just peaceful and fun, and there's an incredible amount of cool people here, which I like even more. I'm here today with Dustin Moilanen, and Dustin is a co-founder of ACTA, is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, ACTA, correct.
Which is ACTA Winery. How are you doing, Dustin?
I'm great. It's a great day, harvest.
Yeah, right. And I appreciate you taking the time. Not easy during this particular period. Where are you at this particular point, harvest-wise?
We've got a little red out there, so we've wrapped up all of our whites. Last of the Pinot Noir coming in today from out in Sebastopol. And then we've got a couple of Cabernet vineyards coming in on Monday. A little blending vineyard for our red blend, and a little Merlot from up in Geyserville will probably be by the end of the week.
So you're fairly spread out.
We're spread out.
The name ACTA, where did that come from?
Yeah, so ACTA comes from a Latin phrase, acta non verba, which is something that I've been aware of for a number of years. I actually wanted to call the winery that. One of my wife's main jobs is keeping me from getting too fancy. So she kind of said, that's a lot to ask of people, to track that down on a label and kind of put that all together. So the acta non verba, it literally means deeds, not words. So we did shorten that in the process of naming the winery and ended up with ACTA. That particular translation of deeds in Latin is, because there's a few, it means something done with the best of intent, right? And so there's so many things that apply to that about what we're doing here. And then we use the acta non verba as our motto, more or less.
So you are the co-founder, as you said. Who are your partners with this venture?
Well, I do have a business partner, a longtime friend of mine. We've known each other going on just about 20 years. As he likes to say, his expertise comes in wine consumption, more or less. But that's how we met, bonded over food and wine, actually met at a charity event out in Florida years ago. And this is something that we worked on for a number of years before putting it together. So he certainly deserves the moniker of co-founder. The other one simply is my wife, and really the rest of my family, my kids too. I would include them in that, and one day when they're old enough, that'll go on their business card too, hopefully.
How many kids you got?
3.
Yeah, wow. And ages?
They're all young, and they all just had birthdays, so we've got an 8, an 11, and a 13.
Well, let's talk about you and your background. And, I'm sure you've been asked this question a few thousand times. What was your entree into the wine business, or were you from a wine family? How did that happen?
Yeah, not from a wine family. That is for sure. From a family that had wine around. I had, I would say, less than zero appreciation for it. Part of my family is Italian, so it was always on the table, but I can't recall it ever being good wine, or even probably reasonably good wine. In fact, I can recall my great-grandfather just blending random bottles in his glass. If it was red, etc. So certainly none of that. I worked my way through school as a guy that was studying business, and of course worked in restaurants. And while I was doing that, I worked at a place that inspired me to get into wine. There was a semi-retired British master of wine that was doing their program there.
Wow.
Difficult guy kind of all the way around, but for whatever reason he was fairly kind to me and saw that I had a little interest, and he nurtured that. And so my inroads into wine was on that side of things. I worked as a sommelier and a wine director to begin, all the while doing some home winemaking, in later years. And then the first time I worked for a producer, which was in the Napa Valley, I was there in a sales and marketing capacity and did that for a very long time. So when I'm sitting with the rest of our winemaking team and we're making choices about our blends and some of the things in our process, I typically play the role of the person coming from a consumerism point of view, and I think it has to come from that history, obviously. I try to make decisions that keep us on trend but stay within our style that we've established. In fact, personally, I try to step aside and make sure that I don't make wines that are 110% for me. I think that could be great, but the world is full of diverse palates, and so you have to find, I believe anyway, you have to find a middle ground and be aware of that. And I'm thankful for that past, because I think that's where that balance comes from.
So are you one of the winemakers? Are you the winemaker? How does that work?
I get to call myself Director of Winemaking. That's another title that you get to wear or bestow upon yourself, I guess, when you're in a small operation like us. I work with a consultant, and then we have a number of people on our team. From a winemaking perspective, and I think more importantly from a decision-making perspective, we like to have big tasting panels. For the same reason that I might bring that sort of consumerism angle to how we should be going about our business. I think at least that I know that I can't be totally trusted. I think it's important to have other voices in the room and in the process and so on and so forth. So to me, that's a little bit more important aspect of the winemaking.
We are in Alexander Valley. We're on 128.
Yep.
And a very well-known area to people who love wine. How did you find this property?
It's an interesting story. It came actually through my business partner. A person mentioned to him they'd recently been to the area and just saw that it was for sale. We had done due diligence on a few other properties over the years and looked at some spaces, and nothing kind of lined up and fit quite right. So that's quite literally how we learned about it. There's a lot of history there. There's been agriculture here for a very long time, not just grape growing. Alexander Valley's had a lot going on. With the general knowledge of the area, we knew it was at least worth taking a look at, following up on on that. And within a couple of days, we were out here kind of vetting the spot.
How many acres do you have here?
So the property in totality is 16 acres, and then it's divided into 9 plantable. In fact, it was planted when we purchased the property. We farmed that the first year. It didn't look great. I mean, a lot of the stuff here had quite a bit of age on it. Kind of had an idea of where it was headed, but you don't know what you don't know, And so we kind of just cleaned it up and gave it a vintage. And since then, we've removed most of it except for some really interesting old vine Zinfandel, and we're currently replanting that 9 acres.
One thing great about Sonoma, great about Alexander Valley, is that you can grow just about anything out here.
You can, and in Greater Sonoma for sure. In fact, the freedom in winemaking that I find in Sonoma is one of the most important and interesting things about being here. It's so much bigger than some of the, perhaps more well-known regions that are just so small and have become, in a lot of ways, monocultures are nearly close to that, with 1 or 2 varietals being, totally dominant. You can find good whatever almost anywhere in Sonoma because we have so many different microclimates and soils, and it's such a big area. And so specifically here, we currently have the Old Vines Inn, which again is a really cool, old vineyard that has, it's certainly not just Zinfandel. I mean, my untrained viticultural eye sees 3 or 4 things in there at least, but neat, makes really fun wine. I don't know what we're going to replant here yet. I'm hung up on that right now, I will tell you. I'm so concerned with changing climate and how to address that. I think, not many years ago, it would have been very easy to just say, we're going to go back with Bordeaux's here. Many of our neighbors have nice Cabernet, et cetera. But I'm taking the time to figure out probably what could be a better decision for long term. I think in a way it's almost, it could be a little more crucial just because this isn't, a gigantic piece of property with hundreds of acres of vines. And so we have to get it right, more or less, and it is a decision for the future. It's a decision for my children, probably. I mean, they'll be the next ones to manage a replant here if we do it right. And so I want to make sure we take the time and thought to make sure it's the right choice. From a perspective of, why don't you just go for the Cabernet? It's the big cash crop, and we know we can grow really nice Cabernet here. I mean, that's proven. But from a climate perspective, if we want to make our own wines from estate fruit, when you have things like a Bordeaux blend like we do, but we call it a red blend, or more or less a kitchen sink blended rosé, that's, you can establish those styles, and there are other things that you can fit in there that maintain that style that are probably much more tolerant of drought when it happens, and longer, warmer growing seasons. And so that's, it's a consideration to be made.
I believe you said you opened in what year was it? Here.
Well, we finished acquiring the property in very early 21, 2 very heavy years of rehabilitating pretty much everything here, and then our tasting room opened in the late fall of last year.
So in a way, in a very warped kind of way, COVID helped you out a little bit because you had breathing room.
Yeah, COVID was, this is a tough thing to kind of say because you're going to get some different reactions to this, but there was a lot of unintended positives to COVID, and I think we're a good example of that. I've talked to people not just in this business, but in many businesses that, started their own thing during that time. There was a large amount of time to reflect on what you might want to do, moving forward with your life and your livelihood. Certainly that had a lot to do with the added vigor that we pursued this at that time. And then, if you're going to be working on rehabilitating an existing winery and kind of clearing the land and repurposing it and stuff, and not having wines ready in a tasting room, when you had to be closed anyway, it wasn't the worst thing in the world.
So again, we're here at this tasting room, and for our listeners who want to come by here, can they just wander in? Do they need to make an appointment? How does it work?
Yeah, we strongly recommend appointments, but they're not required. It's not a requirement, certainly of our licensing or anything like that. So we've got a great tasting room. I will say currently open Thursday to Sunday, so we're not a 7-day-a-week operation. Indoor tasting lounge, outdoor patio. That's kind of a new thing that we added since we've been here.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Right outside the window here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And most importantly for our listeners then, how would they learn about you online?
Well, actawine.com. That's the easiest place, but we're as involved as we can be on all the social media sites and Instagram and Facebook and all of this stuff. And so we have, I think, a pretty significant online presence, and you can find us there.
Excellent. Dustin, thank you for taking the time during harvest. It's really hard to get a winemaker corralled for a little while, but I appreciate your being together here today with me.
It's my pleasure, and a good example of the time. I'll be standing up and leaving you and headed right off to crush 2 lots that we brought in today. So that's how it goes.
Never a moment to waste.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.